Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Starchild podcast. Yesterday, I had the chance to watch the new Martin Scorsese film, The Irishman, also known as I Heard You Paint Houses, which is the same title of the book that it's based on. It is about the life of a man by the name of Frank Sheeran, who was a World War II vet that became the personal hitman for the Bufalino crime family. Um, the runtime for this film is extremely long, um, but it encapsulates a lot. It takes place over the entire lifespan of Frank Sheeran. So it's 3 hours and 30 minutes. Um, it's essentially like a miniseries packed into one film. Um, uh, De Niro plays Frank Sheeran. Also stars Al Pacino, who plays Jimmy Hoffa, who was the president of the Teamsters Union. And also Joe Pesci, who plays Russell Bufalino, the head of the Bufalino crime family. I took a lot of notes. It was worth sitting through the 3.5 hours. Definitely hard to do with everyone's busy lives nowadays, to be able to sit through a 3.5 hour long film. But definitely worth it, because Martin Scorsese is a filmmaker that I look up to the most, one of the most. He's one of my favorite film directors. From Mean Streets to Taxi Driver to Raging Bull, Goodfellas, Casino, Wolf of Wall Street, Shutter Island, The Irishman. So many good ones that he's directed. The cinematographer of this film is Rodrigo who has done a couple other Scorsese films, also including Argo, Babel, Brokeback Mountain, Wolf of Wall Street, and others. This, in my opinion, is probably the last of this type of American gangster genre that spans 50 years, from The Godfather in 1972, Francis Ford Coppola, to The Irishman in 2019 by Scorsese, both starring Al Pacino. So, in my opinion, this is probably the last of the kind of epic American gangster films, which I would categorize this under that genre. Um, let's see. I took a lot of notes for this one. So this movie is about Frank Sheeran, who is kind of a undereducated World War II veteran, who doesn't have a whole lot of prospects in life. He's a truck driver in Philadelphia. He delivers meat to delicatessens, and then he gets mixed up. He gets introduced to Russell Bufalino, who then changes his life by introducing him to several other people in the Italian mafia. Robert De Niro's attorney is played by Ray Romano, who is William Bufalino, who is related to Russell Bufalino. He does a great job in the film. Very believable characters. Also stars Harvey Keitel, who plays Angelo Bruno, who's kind of like the other big crime boss other than Russell Bufalino. So there's Angelo Bruno and Russell Bufalino. They're the two Italian crime bosses that have the really big gold rings that eventually Frank Sheeran, the Irishman, receives one as well, being the only non-Italian to have one of these rings. Frank Sheeran is a ruthless killer in this movie. He is the antagonist, or no, he is the protagonist. Sorry, but he plays a ruthless killer who, at the same time, tries to be a dad, which doesn't really work out. Other than Frank Sheeran, this movie is about Jimmy Hoffa, who was the president of the Teamsters Union, who I was a part of for many years. I was a Teamster as well. And it's about Frank Sheeran's relationship with Russell Bufalino and his relationship with Jimmy Hoffa. And he's kind of, his loyalty to each kind of gets tested as the movie goes on. Al Pacino did a great job as Jimmy Hoffa, playing kind of a very fiery personality, very great orator, speech giver, great negotiator, doesn't take no for an answer. And because of that, he butts heads with a lot of people, including Frank, Robert De Niro's character, because a lot of these main characters have a hard time negotiating with one another and reasoning with one another. And because of this miscommunication, things escalate dramatically, very quickly. Overall, I give this film, I would say 8.6. My favorite Scorsese film being Taxi Driver and Raging Bull. But this is definitely up there as being one of my favorites. So I'm excited for his upcoming films. I know he's also taking part of either a miniseries or a movie based on the book Devil in the White City. I'm excited for that one. That's a great book if you haven't read it, based on a true story about a ruthless killer during the Chicago World Fair at the turn of the 19th century. Great book. He also has another project coming up that the name escapes me right now. But if you haven't seen The Irishman, I highly recommend this film. Scorsese is one of the great last American kind of mainstream filmmakers out there. So I'm glad that Netflix was able to finance this film and make the CGI anti-aging technology happen, which I am a fan of. It wasn't very noticeable at first, really. So I highly recommend this film. Take bathroom breaks if you have to. It is 3.5 hours long. Treat it like a miniseries. Watch it in hour-long, 45-minute to hour-long chunks. But I like this kind of historical biopic that Scorsese went for, going from 1940s World War II to the early 2000s, when Frank Sheeran was an elderly man in retirement home. So here is one of the last trailers for the film. De Niro eventually becomes the president of a local union, Union 326, which Russell gives him that position.
I was one of 1,000 working stiffs until I wasn't no more.
You got a good friend here. You don't know how good a friend you got.
But great acting, great cinematography.
After a while, he started giving me
Great directing. But this is more than likely being the last American Gangster film, especially by Scorsese. But it's a great one to go out on, I think.
You don't see what I see, what I've been through.
A friend of ours is having a little trouble. A friend at the top.
Hi, Frank. This is Jimmy Hoffa.
Glad to meet you.
Big business and the government is on the attack. You want to be a part of this? A part of this history?
Last point that I wanted to make is I briefly mentioned that I was in the Teamsters Union for a number of years. I have this quick graph from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that shows kind of the trajectory of union membership throughout the last century. And essentially where we are today is where union membership began in 1917 as well. Roughly 10, 11 million members nationwide, which is extremely pathetic, knowing that union membership can be at 33, 34% at its peak. And with more union members, workers have more speaking power and more say at the board table of corporations that are usually filled with shareholders and CEOs and just administration of officials that only speak to the shareholders rather than the workers. So more union membership is a good thing in my opinion. So if you're a part of a union, learn more about it, become more active, organize, fight for workers' rights. If you're not in a union, research unions and look up what it takes to unionize and to organize. Because workers' rights have been on the decline for decades, and it's about time that people join more unions and educate themselves on them. So thank you so much for listening. I'm Starchild. The Irishman was well worth the watch. I give it an 8.6. And tune in next week. Thank you so much for watching.